Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into the famously terrible decisions characters make in horror movies. You know the drill. You're sitting on the edge of your seat, yelling at the screen because the protagonist is literally doing the exact opposite of what any rational human being would do. But today, we're going to look at the source material, analyzing some of the most egregious lapses in judgment in cinematic history. We're going to see how completely tossing basic logic out the window is actually what drives the whole plot forward. So let's just get right into it.
And that brings us to this quote, which honestly establishes the core thesis for our explainer today perfectly. As the analysis points out, anyone who has watched a horror movie knows that characters make horrible decisions. But here's the fascinating reality. Without those horrible decisions, there is quite literally no horror movie to watch. Rational choices completely shut down the narrative. Irrational choices, on the other hand, open the door to 90 minutes of pure suspense.
Which leads us to Section 1, Fatal Curiosity and Greed, or ignoring the glaringly obvious danger. Let's kick things off with a totally baffling choice from Jeepers Creepers. Our main characters, Derry and Trish, are out in the middle of literal nowhere. They spot this super creepy truck driver dumping what is very clearly a rolled-up human corpse into a giant pipe on the side of the road. The guy sees them, chases them down, and literally rams their car off the road. Now, the overwhelmingly logical choice here is to floor it and report the incident to the very first police officer you see. But what does Derry do? He decides to turn around and go back to investigate the pipe.
Talk about a fatal mistake, because he just had to play detective at a literal murderer's disposal site. Derry's curiosity puts him right inside that nasty pipe. Once he's in there, naturally, he gets startled by some rats, falls all the way down, and absolutely seals his fate. He basically serves himself up on a silver platter to become the creeper's next target.
Moving along to another kind of fatal oversight, we have what we'll call the drag me to hell error. So, the protagonist, Christine, thinks she's finally gotten rid of this cursed button that's literally going to send her to eternal damnation. Huge relief, right? But then her boyfriend pulls out an envelope containing a quarter. It turns out she made the most disastrously simple mistake ever. She didn't actually verify the contents of her envelope. She accidentally gave away the harmless quarter and kept the demonic curse all to herself. If she had just taken like 3 seconds to look inside, boom, she would have been totally free. Now, pivoting from fatal curiosity over to just pure greed, let's look at the absolute classic setup in the blockbuster hit Jaws. I mean, ask yourself honestly, if you heard on the news that a giant, man-eating great white shark was swimming around your local shores, would you close the beach?
For literally any normal human being, the answer is a resounding yes. But not for Mayor Vaughn. He's looking at two extremely clear options here. Safeguard the citizens, or prioritize the summer tourism dollars that the town depends on. And wildly, he stubbornly refuses to close the beach. He decides that tourism income is far more important than the actual safety of those tourists. And as we all know, he soon learns the incredibly bloody consequences of that greedy mistake.
All right, moving on to Section 2, Panic under extreme pressure, where characters just completely choke in the heat of the moment. So these are the instances where characters are under insane pressure and, inexplicably, choose the absolute worst possible escape routes. A perfect example comes from I Know What You Did Last Summer. The character Helen is sprinting for her life from a crazed, hook-wielding killer. And as the source material notes, she actually manages to get just a few feet away from absolute freedom. There is a literal marching band and a huge crowd of onlookers right in front of her. Safety is totally within her grasp. So her next move is absolutely crucial. The completely obvious, logical play is to sprint straight into that crowd of people to escape. But no. Instead, Helen makes the unbelievably foolish decision to stop dead in her tracks and turn around to look behind her at the last possible second. It's just a moron hesitation, and it leads directly to a death that she so easily could have avoided. We see a super similar panic-induced fail in Scream. Tatum is trapped in a garage with the Ghostface killer. But surprisingly, she actually puts up an amazing fight. She manages to knock the killer to the floor multiple times. So I gotta ask, when you have an armed killer laid out on the ground, what is your immediate next move? I mean, you're in a garage full of tools. You kick the killer while he's down, or you look for something, literally anything, to use as a weapon to press your advantage, right? But Tatum just abandons all logic. She inexplicably decides her best bet is to crawl out of a pet door built into the garage door, a pet door that is so obviously, visibly way too small for her to fit into. And that brings us to Section 3, abandoning all tactical advantage, or snatching defeat straight from the jaws of victory. Now we're getting into those incredibly frustrating moments where characters actually have a massive tactical advantage or even total safety and decide to throw it all away for absolutely no logical reason. A literal masterclass in this happens in The Purge. Just picture this scenario. It's a night when all crime is completely legal. There's a mob of bloodthirsty maniacs set to break into your home. But you have a highly secure, perfectly good safe room and an absolute arsenal of weapons. Surely it makes complete sense to hold up in there and blast away anyone who comes near the door, right?
Well, logic has no place here. As you can see, this family makes a staggering volume of idiotic choices. First, the son, Charlie, decides to actively disarm the house security system. Then, on Purge night of all nights, they let a total stranger, who is actively being chased by murderers, inside. Next, for some reason, the entire family voluntarily walks out of their impenetrable safe room while the house is under attack. And the absolute cherry on top? They split up. They literally make themselves incredibly easy targets to get picked off one by one. It is a complete and total erasure of their tactical advantage. Okay, up next, Section 4, Unnecessary Heroics, Pointless Sacrifices, and Massive Oversights. Let's talk about characters who desperately try to be heroes, but end up making incredibly frustrating, fatal blunders because they completely lack spatial awareness. Look at the climax of I Am Legend. Robert Neville decides to sacrifice himself to save Anna and her son from the rampaging Darkseekers. He shoves them into this reinforced coal shed, pulls the pin on a grenade, and completely blows himself up along with the monsters. But here's the thing. That shed can clearly fit another person. It would take Neville literally 2 steps to get inside. 2 steps. He could have just lobbed the grenade at the horde, taken those 2 steps into the shed, and closed the door. The whole self-sacrifice was entirely pointless. Another massively frustrating oversight happens in Halloween Resurrection. Laurie Strode has finally done it. She's captured the unstoppable Michael Myers. She gets him dangling upside down by a rope. She has won. But in her big moment of victory, she fails to realize one insanely critical, glaring detail. Even though he is hanging completely upside down, his hands are totally 100% free. She's standing right there getting ready to cut the rope, which would drop him and end her nightmare forever. That is the logical choice. But instead, she gets close to him to unmask him just to see if it's really her brother. She totally throws away her ultimate victory, stepping right into arm's reach of a killer whose arms are perfectly free to grab her, purely for the sake of unnecessary curiosity. Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the ultimate logical failures. This is when the solution is quite literally staring them right in the face. We're talking about the most unbelievable, head-scratching lapses in basic logic, heavily featured, of course, in the Saw franchise. In Saw 2, Addison gets poisoned and finds an antidote inside this glass box. The catch? There are holes fitted with razor blades to reach through. The logical solution was almost insultingly simple. Step 1, walk to the other side of the glass box. Step 2, see the lock that literally has the key still sticking right out of it? Step 3, simply turn the key, unlock the box, and safely grab the antidote. But she doesn't even look around. Instead, she rashly shoves both of her hands directly into the razor blade holes, getting herself permanently trapped. But listen, out of all the films, all the insane traps, and all the panicked choices we've covered, the absolute #1 most egregious failure of logic goes all the way back to the very first Saw movie, and it belongs to Dr. Gordon. Dr. Gordon is chained to a pipe by his ankle. A ringing phone, his literal lifeline, is just out of his arm's reach. He's holding a handsaw. He decides his absolute only option is to use that saw to completely amputate his own foot, just so he can walk over to the phone. What he completely missed was the mind-bogglingly simple solution. He could have just held onto the blade of the saw and used the handle to reach out and pull the phone closer to him. He had a reaching tool in his hand the entire time. And honestly, this all connects beautifully right back to our opening thought. These characters absolutely have to abandon logic. They have to ignore the reaching tool, the open safe room, the 2 steps into the reinforced shed. We, as the audience, secretly need them to make these terrible decisions, because otherwise, the credits would roll in 10 minutes. But seeing these massive logical failures laid out so clearly certainly makes you wonder, if you were thrown into one of these terrifying scenarios, exactly how long would you survive in their shoes? Would you make the logical choice, or would you just become part of the movie? Thank you so much for joining me on today's Explainer.